Hey, my name is Rowan Smith and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare and conquer your upcoming hike, trek or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for. Let's get into today's episode. Okay, hello guys. So today we are talking about the best gym machine exercises for hikers. And specifically what we're going to be going into is I'm going to be diving into a few of the machine-based exercises that I quite like for hikers if you are in a gym, and also a few of the machine-based exercises that I typically don't really like for hikers and what I think you should probably not be doing or potentially find another alternative. Now, this is a topic that I've never really talked about before, and it was inspired by a question that came up in the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group the other day, and it is something that's worth diving into because as a general rule of thumb, when it comes to your strength training, typically what I recommend is doing body weight or free weight or even cable exercises for your training for hiking. Now, the reason behind this is, if you haven't sort of heard about this before, is basically when we're in machines and when we're sort of doing something like a chest press or a pull down on a machine in a gym, yes, you can work certain muscles, but because the machines tend to be set in a certain plane of motion, they're very, very stable. They don't have a lot going on. Sometimes some of the smaller stabilizing muscles and other things going on in the body get a little bit neglected. So, for example, when we're hiking, if all the strengthening you did was on the machines in the gym, you might find it a little bit harder when you are actually going down hills because your knees might not be able to stabilize quite as well as if you were doing free weight exercises or body weight exercises or whatever it may be. So typically, as a general rule of thumb, doing the majority of your training with either free weights or body weight is usually going to be better for a hiker when it comes to your strength training. However, saying this, that doesn't mean machine-based training can't have its own merit and can't find its own way into your program. Now, typically, I'd recommend machine-based exercises for a hiker in a few different situations. Now, situation number one is you can pretty much use any type of machine-based exercise in your gym program if you prefer it, as long as you are doing probably, let's say, 85% of your work with free weights or body weight, and maybe 15% of your actual programming on a machine. As a general rule of thumb, doesn't really matter. You go right ahead. As long as you're doing the majority of stuff, free weights or body weight, a little bit of machine work in any way or another, it can always be good if you enjoy it. Now, situation number two, and this is where I typically do use machine-based exercises for my hikers, is if there's a particular area of the body which you really do need to load up with quite a bit of resistance. And so you've been recommended from a physio to do some heavy work, or maybe you're just trying to, improve your strength to a certain level, but you're really hesitant about loading up weights when it comes to free weight, or comes to body weight or whatever, and loading up quite heavy. A machine-based exercise can be a good alternative to really challenge the muscles with heavier stuff, because there's much less risk of things going wrong, and it's much easier to actually load up the muscles in certain points. So if you have been recommended from somewhere to do heavier exercises and heavier resistance, but you are a little bit nervous about it, this can be a good option. And then obviously doing your free weights and your body weight around that, which may have a little bit less resistance. And then the third option is if simply you just need a bit of a change in your training and you just need a little bit of a different thing to explore in your training. You need a perk of your motivation, and maybe you're like, well, actually I've been doing free weights and body weights for ages. Maybe I might do machines for a few weeks and just have a bit of a fresh start, or whatever it may be. So in any of those situations, fair game for machine-based training. So now that's out of the way, I'll talk you through sort of what my favorite machine-based exercises are for hikers in any of those categories, but basically any hiker could really fit this into their program in one way or another. So first of all is a single-legged leg press. Now, the leg press machine is something probably all of us have used at some stage or another if we've been to a gym. And typically it's an exercise that works quadriceps, maybe a little bit of glutes. And it can be, an okay way of developing strength in that particular area. Never as good as squats, but it can be pretty beneficial. Now, what I particularly like for hikers is a single-legged leg press. So basically doing this leg press just with one leg at a time. Now, what this does is it just adds a little bit extra challenge to this movement, adds a little bit extra contribution from the glutes, and it can be a really, really great addition into someone's program, particularly if you get uncomfortable doing something like a lunge or a split squat, and you're doing, say, squats in the gym or whatever may be with two legs. Doing a single-legged leg press instead of a lunge can be a really, really good option. So that's number one, and I think any hiker should give that a go because it can be a really great exercise. Now, exercise number 2 in the gym is what's called a Smith machine calf raise. Now, if you haven't come across the Smith machine before, basically it's this big sort of squat rack in the gym and it's got a barbell attached. But what happens, as opposed to the barbell being a free weight where you just put it on your back or whatever and you just move the barbell in space, this barbell is set on a bit of a rail. So it literally only goes up, only goes down. So it is still classified as a machine because it's just locked into this one plane of motion. Now, typically most people, I would say avoid the Smith machine for a lot of exercises, but it can be a really, really good option if you're trying to load up your calf raises. Now, as I've said before, heavy calf raises can be beneficial for many hikers. So when you're doing repetitions of 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 with quite a bit of resistance, it can be really, really beneficial. But sometimes people can struggle for balance when they have this much weight. Sometimes they can get a little bit nervous about their calf raises or whatever it may be, and they might not be able to load, a typical calf raise up effectively. Now, the Smith machine is a really good option in this, in the sense that seeing it is on that straight up, straight down, you can load this up quite heavily. You can really, really focus on putting load through these calves, and nothing is ever going to go wrong. So either with 2 legs at a time, 1 leg at a time, whether it's off the floor or off a step, whether it's seated or standing, any of those options can be really, really good. A Smith machine calf raise. Now, obviously describing all these exercises, sometimes can be a little bit tricky over this audio format. So if you do want some ideas and visuals over these things I'm describing, please do come and find me in the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group. Join up the group, ask me what these exercises are, and I'll post up a video for you so you can get a good visual on that. But moving forward for the next one, next exercise I really, really like, machine-based exercise, is a seated row. Now, a row is basically, a pulling motion, working some specific muscles in the back, a little bit of the biceps. We can do this with a pack, we can do this with dumbbells, and it can be really, really good. But sometimes people do struggle, again, to load up this particular movement pattern with dumbbells or with a pack or whatever it may be. So using a machine-based option for this every once in a while can be really, really good. So whether you're using a seated row with a cable, whether it's sort of on an actual machine or whatever it is, I do like a seated row for hikers, and I'd recommend give that a go. In line with that, another machine I really like is the assisted pull-up machine. Now, pull-ups themselves are absolutely amazing, and if you can do pull-ups, definitely put them into your strength program as a hiker. However, saying that, obviously pull-ups are pretty tough exercises. So a great alternative to this, if you are in the gym and you do have access to this, is the assisted pull-up machine, which is essentially you doing exactly the same motion as a pull-up, but you have a little bit of a counterweight and it takes some body weight off you. Now, whether you do a wide grip or a close grip or overhand or underhand, it doesn't really matter for yourself. But as a hiker, an assisted pull-up can be a really, really good option for strengthening up the back, getting yourself ready for a heavy pack, and it can be a really good bang for your buck exercise. And that's another one I really like. Another 2 more machines I do quite like is another one is a seated calf raise. So we talked about doing calf raises on the Smith machine. A seated calf raise is a great great machine which you can use to load up the soleus, which is a little bit deeper calf muscle. So often I talk about from this podcast about doing bent leg calf raises, which target this particular area. Again, with bent leg calf raises, they're great, but sometimes they can be difficult to load up heavy. With a seated calf raise machine, it's literally the easiest thing in the world to load this up heavy. You can sit on the machine, do 5, 6, 7, 8 reps, 10 reps heavy, whatever you're doing, but it is a good option for this particular movement, and I do like it. And then the final one is something that I wouldn't recommend to all hikers, but it can be an okay option, is the leg curl machine, which is specifically working the hamstrings. Now, it might sound a little bit weird, but I do like this purely for the fact that it can target the hamstrings in a very, very particular way, which is often neglected by a lot of hikers. Now, typically we do things like single leg deadlifts or deadlifts, or we might do things like Swiss ball hamstring curls or slider hamstring curls. And these are the really, really good hamstring exercises for hikers. But for whatever reason, particularly for the Swiss ball hamstring curl or slider hamstring curl, sometimes that can be very, very difficult for some people. And if that is inaccessible for you and you can't actually do this particular movement and you can't fit it in anywhere, a leg curl can be a good option. For if you can't actually do those other hamstring exercises, it can be a good way of fitting everything in. So they're typically my favorite gym machine-based exercises for hikers. So the single-legged leg press, the Smith machine calf raise, the seated row, the assisted pull-up, the seated calf raise, and the leg curl. Now, before I wrap things up, I'll talk you through a few exercises that I typically don't recommend for hikers when it comes to machine-based exercises. If I don't, a few that I'd say probably find a different alternative. Now, first one on this is the leg extension machine. So this is a machine probably all of us have used, specifically working the quadriceps. In all honesty, there's so many easier and better ways of working the quadriceps that's going to be relevant for hikers. Yes, you can get a good burn on this particular exercise, but in all honesty, I think you should just do a squat, just do a lunge, just do a single-legged leg press or whatever it may be. The leg extension machine, for most people, I'd say, unless you specifically ask for to do it by the physio or something, probably not for you. In line with that, pretty similar, is the Smith machine, specifically using the Smith machine for squats. Not a great exercise for that, not a great machine for that type of movement. If you're going to do squats, just do a goblet squat or a back squat or something with a free weight. If you struggle with the free weights and you want to work your quads, maybe do your single-legged leg press or just a normal leg press. But Smith machine squats, not so good. And the final one is doing the adduction or abduction machine, which is sort of where you either push your legs out, push your knees out, or you pull your knees in. So it's either working the outsides of the legs or the insides of the legs. You can get a good burn on these machines, and a lot of people do enjoy them, but I think there's much better ways of working these areas. For the outside of the legs, doing things like clams or doing things like leg raises or any body weight banded exercises on that is going to be better. For doing the insides of the legs, just doing something like a med ball squeeze where you hold a medicine ball between your knees and just squeeze really, really tight for 10 seconds and repeat that 3 or 4 times. I think personally it's going to be much, much better than using a machine like that. Now, any machines I haven't mentioned today, it probably means I'm indifferent. So if you like them, use them. If you don't like them, don't use them. It's not like something you have to avoid. It's not like something you have to include. So if I haven't mentioned something that you've been doing, it just means I'm indifferent. It might work, it might not, but it's not something I love, not something I particularly hate. So as I said at the start of the episode, machine-based strength exercises, they're not the most typical thing a hiker would use, but I know a lot of people enjoy them. And in particular situations, they can be very, very beneficial. So hopefully today's given you a bit of an insight into, what you may consider including if you are in the gym and you have access to things like this, or if you wanted to mix up your training a little bit or whatever it may be. Take any of those exercises that I mentioned, put them in for a few weeks, see how it goes. And, you might be surprised, how much you enjoy them or how much it may potentially help your free weight exercises, after you move out of them in 4 or 5 weeks or whatever it may be. Now, as I said before, if you have listened to any of these exercises and you're like, oh, Rowan, what is that? What does that look like? I'm not 100% sure. Come and join me in the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group. Join up that group, post up whatever the question was. I'll share some videos and you can check it out there. So I'm always happy to expand on these episodes in that group. And it is a really, really great resource for any hiker who is interested in their training. So if you want to join that, the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group, I'll leave a link in the show notes below. But either way, thank you very much for listening today. I do hope you've gotten some value out of it. I do hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll talk to you very soon. Bye.